Part 20. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 193. In this era, it is not only necessary to fight for father and mother, but also for family. The Mu family has a single surname here, and there is only one family. Even if Mu Shi is the general banner in the army, or even a general, in this place, if the Mu family is alone, the local people will not take him too seriously. That's what I'm talking about. Back then in Linchan village, the Mu family was able to hunt and sell their prey carefree, without worrying about being squeezed out by the villagers or blackmailed by Li Zheng and the people in the Yamen because of the protection of the Lu family. Now, the Mu family left Linchan village, separated from the Lu family, and was placed alone in Chingutan. The Lu family's engine was lost, but it also caused a lot of trouble. Anyone would dare to probe into Mu's house. In Linchan village, who would dare to nest outside Mu's house and spy randomly? The uncle waited on him first. Although Mu Yangling asked Bo when to call his cousins over, he didn't want to rely on the Lu family to scare them away. It is better to rely on others than himself. The Lu family can only stand behind them to deter them from the Mu family. Mu Yangling hoped that they would fear and respect the Mu family. Let's talk about awe first. Let them be afraid of the Mu family now. So as soon as the blog post left, Mu Yangling lifted a chair and sat down at the door, saying, I still want to send it to the government and let the master judge. The law is always fair, right? Bandita yelled hoo, and her mother-in-law boldly took a look at Mu Yangling and said, Ms. Mu, we will not be able to get out if we send this to the government. How about this? We will compensate the Mu family for the loss. How about it? Mu Yangling blinked, and asked, what loss does our Mu family have? Does worrying count? How do we count this loss? No, you say that I cheated you if you counted too much, but if you count too little, I don't think so. Comfortable. Thief finally spat out the cloth strip in his mouth, spit out a mouthful of saliva, and asked in a rough voice, then what do you want? Mu Yangling tilted his head and thought for a moment, and said, it is said that a thief will not be a thief after his hands are cut off. I want to try the effect. Thief turned pale, and pouted his neck and said, Mu Yangling, don't go too far. I went to your shed last night, but I didn't do anything. Instead I was taken aback by you. How to calculate this account? Mu Yangling's face darkened. Are you denying the fact of the theft last night? Thief felt a burst of pressure under Mu Yangling's cold gaze, and he didn't dare to deny it. He just said, anyway, we can't cut off our hands. How can we live without them? Seeing everyone looking at him with piercing eyes, he couldn't help shouting, I didn't mean to be a thief, so you don't have to use your hands when you work in the fields. Then everyone looked away. Some of the surrounding villagers began to intercede for them, saying, Miss Aling, I think you should forgive others. Anyway, they also know that they are wrong, and if they really want to cut off their hands, how will they support the whole family in the future? Another person whispered to Mu Yangling, these 5 people are all from the next village, and they have many relatives. They will cause trouble after they are provoked. I think it is suitable, otherwise the 2 villages will not be peaceful in the future. Mu Yangling lowered his head and thought for a while. His eyes turned around among the surrounding villagers, and seeing many strangers, he knew that they were from the next village who came to listen to the movement, so he said, it's okay if you don't cut off your hands, just let me take pictures of each of you. How about a slap on the shoulder? It can be regarded as a punishment for you. Bandita asked in a daze, just pat the shoulder, and you won't be sent off if you don't cut off your hands. Mu Yangling nodded with a smile. Bandita stood up with difficulty, and said, it's easy to say, then let me do it first. Zai Hung took a kitchen knife from the house and cut their rope. The thief Jia loosened his shoulders, stepped forward and said relaxedly, let me do it first. Cheer up. Mu Yangling got up and slapped him on the shoulder. Everyone only heard a click, and then there was a scream from Thief A, and the whole person fell to the ground dripping with cold sweat. "Boss, what's the matter with you?" The wife of Thief A rushed forward and hugged him. Mu Yangling sneered and said, "Don't use too much force, or the bones in his arm will be broken in a while, and he won't be able to connect them back." Bandit A looked at Mu Yangling with bloodshot eyes, unable to speak in pain. Mu Yangling walked to the side, touched a stone in front of the door and said, "Actually, I didn't use much force. I just slapped it lightly, and it broke." Broken. Mu Yangling patted the stone lightly with his palm, and the stone, which was the size of 2 adult heads, was full of cracks in everyone's sight, and then broken. Thief A's mother-in-law screamed miserably, hugged her husband helplessly, and asked, "Your hand is broken, what should you do? What should you do? Mu Yangling, you are so cruel." Mu Yangling looked at her with a smile and said, "Who said my aunt is cruel? I am good-hearted. I should have chopped off both of his hands. Now I just slap him. He agreed just now." Mu Yangling looked at the remaining 4 people and said, "How is it? Now it's your turn." The 4 of them shook their heads in unison, knelt on the ground involuntarily, and said, "Miss Mu, Grandma Mu, you guys know that you are wrong, and you will never dare again. We will take a detour when we see you and the Mu family, please. Please spare us." Among the villagers, a man in his 50s stood up separately from the crowd, looked at the situation of Thief A, fixed it temporarily with wood, got up and looked at Mu Yangling heavily. "Ms too bad, although the 5 of them made mistakes, they are still from our Mata village." Mu Yangling saw that someone who could talk was finally here, so there was no need to go around in circles, and asked, "What? Your Mata village has become a ferry, and the villagers came to look for the victim without saying that they were thieves' stubble." The visitor endured for a while, then cupped his hands and said, "It's their fault, but you can't get anywhere clean. They got caught just after touching it. Didn't you design it? You didn't lose anything, but you cut him off the arm, broke their family's livelihood, and your Mu family is too domineering." Mu Yangling laughed angrily at him, "So when our Mu family realizes that someone might come to steal something, we should open the door wide, wait for the thief to come in and take all the things, then close the door, and just pretend that this has never happened. Is it not domineering? Not vicious? Mata village is very logical, or have you always been such thieves? This customer who was patronized by you didn't come according to your ideas, so the whole village came to the door. You're talking nonsense. Our Mata village is a serious farmer. When did we become a thief?" Mu Yangling kicked Bandit A directly in front of him, and asked coldly, "Then which village is he from?" The visitor was speechless for a while, and finally said, "I won't talk to you as a child, so I called your father? How dare a yellow-haired girl talk to an elder like this? Your Mu family is a good tutor. The reborn wife is farming." Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 194. Our Mu family is in charge of me, but I would like to ask who you are. I deal with the thieves who came to steal my house. Which onion are you? The visitor choked, his face turned black, and his already dark face became even darker, like black coal in a pot. Among the surrounding villagers, there were people standing behind him one after another. There were 17 or 18 of them, and they clamored, It belongs to Mata village, and those who want to dispose of our village have to ask our village if they agree." Another old man squeezed out from the crowd, and said to Mu Yangling with a smile, "Don't be angry, little girl, these are all young and strong from our Mata village. Young people, they are very angry, and they talk a little too aggressively. The 5 of them are I made a mistake, but as the saying goes, if you know your mistakes, you can correct them, and there is nothing good about them. Since the 5 of them already know that they have made mistakes, let them forgive you, and they will also remember your benefits in the future." Mu Yangling glanced past him, fixed on Haiguo Ten behind him, and asked, "Then what if I don't agree?" Haiguotan's eyes darkened, he looked at Mu Yangling and said, then Miss Mu has the final say. Lu Yuan, who had already walked over, was about to rush up when he heard the words, but was stopped by Lu Ting. Lu Yuan lowered his voice and said, brother, what are you waiting for? Didn't you see Aling being bullied? Didn't you see Aling winking at us? Come up later, Aling is capable, do you think these people can deal with her? Lu Yuan immediately felt relieved when he thought that Aling had crawled out of the dead. Suppressing the clamoring cousins behind him, they followed the surrounding villagers to watch the excitement. The people in Matu village have already started to make a fuss, shouting, don't give me shame. The smiling old man also turned cold, and said, Miss Mu is not giving the old man face by saying this. The 5 of them really deserve to be beaten. Come and bring them back. Our clan will punish them. From Matu village, a few young men came forward to escort the bandit A and others to leave. Mu Yangling kicked the man out with one foot, stepped on the chest of the thief, and said, you better not annoy my aunt is not strong enough, if I am not careful, I will become this stone. After finishing speaking, he moved his foot and stepped on a stone not far away, and rubbed it hard, and the stone cracked. Now the people who stepped forward looked at each other in blank dismay, and some dared not step forward. Zai Hung sneered and said, what a coward, even my cousin can't match a finger and dare to find fault. So many people bully one, how shameless. Bowen tried his best to squeeze from Lu Ting to Zai Hung's side, grimacing, and said, there are so many grown ups bullying our children, so don't be ashamed. As soon as these words came out, even Haiguotan and the old man couldn't help but blush, and those young men in Matu village were so angry that they rushed up to grab Mu Yangling, but Mu Yangling opened his hand and grabbed him directly, throwing out the collar and side waist. Mu Yangling punched all the people who rushed up. She turned around and immediately involved all the people in Matu village present. She moved quickly, and she was fast and skillful with her small grappling hands. After a while, all the 18 people from Matu village were knocked to the ground by her. Chi Heiran, who was hiding in the crowd, saw his eyes brighten, and said to Fan Zijin in a low voice, I've never seen Mu Yangling make this move before. Isn't this the grabbing hand? Even if Fan Zijin didn't like martial arts, he could still see the traces of the grabbing hand in it. It's grappling hands, but it needs to be much refined. Anyone with a little knowledge of martial arts can learn it. It's more effective than the grappling hands we learn in the military camp. After all, Chi Heiran is an expert of all kinds, and is familiar with various acupuncture points. Mu Yangling's small grasping hand looks simple, just a few movements, but the moves are aimed at the acupuncture points of the person, and the strength of a palm and a pinch cannot be used. When Haiguotan and the old man saw that Mu Yangling had beaten the people they brought to the ground by himself, their expressions changed drastically. Just as they were about to say something, Lu Ting had already pushed away the people in front of him and brought the young and strong Lu family forward. 5 or 6 young men stood behind Mu Yangling. Aling, what's going on? Someone bullied you? Lu Ting asked Mu Yangling, but his eyes were on the people in Matu village. Mu Yangling complained in front of them, cousin, they bully people, they want to steal things from my house, not to mention, they also bully that our Mu family has a single surname, and they want to take people away like this. Lu Ting looked at the black pot, and said, who said that the Mu family has a single surname? Even if my daughter of the Lu family gets married, she is still the aunt of the Lu family. Is this bullying my cousin for not being able to take care of the family in the military camp, or bullying him, isn't our Lu family in Jingutun? Seeing that there were so many more people in the Mu family, the two were really shocked. The reason why they dared to bring someone over to ask for someone was because the Mu family had a single surname from 10 miles and 8 villages. Can cross their entire village? Haiguotan and the old man looked at each other, and in the end the older old man bowed his hands and said softly, this is Brother Lu, right? This is all a misunderstanding. We want to bring people back to punish them, not to cover them up. You don't need to take it back. Let's deal with it in front of my eldest niece and the big guy. It's fairer. Aling promised not to send them to see the official. It's already a big face for you, otherwise you will go to jail. Can you still come out with all your beards and tails? Higuotan and the old man looked at each other, and finally nodded and said, since Miss Mu gave us this face, we have to continue and deal with them here. Mu Yangling smiled and said, it's your business to deal with it, but you have to do it first if you agree to my request. Higuotan's expression changed, he clenched his fists and said, Miss Mu, you can cripple their arms with one palm, please hold your hand high. To be a thief, you have to be prepared to be handed down. This is also a lesson for them. Otherwise, the folks in the village dare to steal things, and they dare not kill people with knives when they go out. Since they can't learn well, they should. My aunt would not mind teaching them by herself, letting them know what can and cannot be done. Higuotan's complexion changed drastically, but Mu Yangling didn't wait for him to say anything. He stepped forward and pressed the thief bee's shoulder with a little force, and then heard a click, and the thief bee screamed. Seeing this, the remaining three people all looked at Mu Yangling in cold sweat, and the thief C even lost control of himself. Mu Yangling broke their arms unceremoniously, then clapped his hands and said, this is a lesson for them, let them remember what can be done and what can't be done. People in Matu village didn't look good, but because there were more than 20 people from the Lu family here, they didn't speak harshly to Mu Yangling like before. Mu Shi in the room saw that the affairs outside were almost done, so he opened the door and came out. Seeing him, Lu Ting was stunned. You are at home, I thought you had gone to the barracks again, so why ask Aling, a doll, to come out to deal with it? Everyone also focused on Mu Shi. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 195. Mu Shi's eyes slid over everyone, until no one dared to make a sound, then he walked to his daughter, and said to the crowd, everyone, Mu Shi is a vulgar person, he doesn't know how to speak, but it's reasonable. Here, Mu Shi is not afraid of offending people. The old people say that they are forgiving and forgiving. Our Mu family is not someone who will not take a step back, but it depends on whether it is worth it. If these 5 people sincerely admit their mistakes, my daughter won't be so angry. My Mu family doesn't want to get rid of Matu village, but I really need to be honest, and my Mu family is not afraid. Mu Shi stared straight at Higuotan with blade-like eyes, and said, I am a person who licks blood from the edge of a knife, and I rely on this ruthlessness. If I were a wolf, my daughter would be a wolf cub. Today I will be a wolf cub in front of my fellow villagers. I, Mu Shi, put my words here first. If anyone bullies my wife and children while I'm not at home, you'd better hope that I die on the battlefield, otherwise, I, Mu Shi, will never end with him. The faces of the people present changed drastically, they all dared not meet Mu Shi's eyes, and took 2 steps back timidly. Lu Ting put his hand on Mu Shi's shoulder and shook his head slightly at him, so Mu Shi didn't say any more harsh words. Lu Ting stepped forward with a smile, cupped his hands and smiled at the silent crowd. Forgive me, folks, my cousin is a rough man, he speaks a bit rough, but he is very nice, and the people in the village get along with my brother too. I've been here for half a year, and I should know him well, he's just that promising, and he treats his wife and children like treasures. Apart from this, everything else is easy to talk about. But everyone is from the village, how could they bully my siblings, nieces, and nephews? Isn't it? Lu Ting said with a smile, our Lu family is next door to Kaoxi village, only a quarter of an hour away from here. In the future, if my eldest niece does anything wrong, just come to the village to find me, and I will teach him a lesson. Lu Yuan also came back to his senses, stepped forward and said with a smile, "Yes, my uncle settled down in our Linchan village before, and my aunt has the same son as my cousin. My uncle and aunt left early, so my uncle and my father took my cousin. My elder brother is like my own son. Back then, my uncle was the one who officiated his marriage. My eldest niece and we were like daughters. If she offends the folks, don't get angry. Just go to the West Village to find us. You can't teach me a lesson. Let's talk about her and give everyone justice." Everyone twitched their mouths when they heard this. Although they were talking about Mu Shi and Mu Yangling, the posture was undoubtedly to support Mu Shi and Mu Yangling. If Mu Yangling really had conflicts with his neighbors in the future, everyone would definitely estimate the attitude of the Lu family in Kaoxi village. Don't bully the Mu family too much. Otherwise, they will go back and move reinforcements. There are many members of the Lu family. Haiguotan twitched the corner of his mouth. Your niece is so capable, I'm afraid no one in these 10 miles and 8 villages can bully her. Now we will take these 5 people back first. Don't worry, they will definitely deter when they see the Mu family in the future. Walk. Mu Yangling snorted coldly, and Mu Shi said, "Didn't you just say that this village will also deal with it? I'm waiting." Lu Ting saw Mu Shi sang red face, hurriedly came out to sing bad face, and said with a smile, "Cousin, since Big Brother said that, he will definitely not lie to you, but people are hurt now, even if they have to deal with it, they can't do it at this time. I think it's better to let them go back first. They have made Mata village such a big embarrassment, and they will deal with it. If you are worried, just go back to Mata village. Not far." After Mu Shi let him go, Mu Yangling gently tapped the arm of Thief B with his toe, which made him tremble. Mu Yangling smiled and said, "Did you see your elder brother's arm? You have to be like him, tie it up like this, otherwise you will be crippled if you connect it later. Don't say I'm too ruthless at that time, Auntie, I'll keep my hand, but I just broke 2 of your bones, but didn't crush them." Although this was a reminder, it was also a threat. Everyone was startled, and hurriedly fixed their arms with branches before leaving in a hurry. The onlookers also took advantage of the chaos to leave. After a while, only the Lu family was left in front of the Mu family. "People." Only then did Lu Ting frown and looked at Mu Shi, disapprovingly said, "Since you are at home, why did you ask some children to come out to deal with things?" "Come in and sit down," Mu Shi explained, "I'm not here to make Aling stand up. I stay in the barracks, so I can't help with family affairs. The whole family relies on Aling for support now. When others see her as a child, they will inevitably bully her. This time is just a chance for her to stand up, and even if I am not around, she will be able to provoke the leader by herself." When Mu Yangling was in Linchan village, she said she was right, but because she had the support of Mu Shi and the Lu family, no one dared to bully her. But it's different outside. Who knows Mu Yangling? Lu Ting understood after thinking about it. Seeing so many cousins here, he clapped his hands and said, "Okay, since you are here today, don't rush back. Go and help us build a thatched hut first. It's almost done, and we can finish it today. Brother Ting is really good at calling people. Brother Shidu, we will build you a thatched house. You have to tell my father later that you are not lazy and won't go back." Mu Shi smiled and said, "Don't worry, I will definitely tell my uncles." Mu Shi asked Mu Yangling to go up the mountain to hunt some prey, and then he would share some with everyone to take back, and then went to build thatched huts with them. Chi Heiran and Fan Zijian mixed in the crowd and left long ago. Chi Heiran made gestures as he walked, but with only 3 or 5 moves, he actually learned the little grabbing hand that Mu Yangling used just now. Satisfied, Chi Heiran put down his hand, and said to Fan Zijian, "After 2 days, Mu Yangling won't be so busy, so I'll come to her to learn this grappling hand, and I'll go back to brother Zhang Ziyi to practice." After Chi Heiran finished speaking, he saw no movement from Fan Zijian, so he turned his head to look, only to find that he lowered his head in deep thought, and asked, "What are you thinking about?" "I'm wondering who Mu Yangling learned Kung Fu from. Haven't you noticed? Her moves are simple but effective. When you and her were feeding each other before, she even made fatal moves when the fire started to forget me. That is a murderous move at all, and I also watched when you and Mu Shi were feeding the move. Mu Yangling can do about 150 moves under your hands, but Mu Shi can't even hold up to 50 moves. And Mu Shi doesn't know all those ultimate moves of Mu Yangling Hui. Don't you think it's strange?" "What's so strange?" "I will, and neither will my father." Fan Zijian glared at him. "Can it be the same? You have a martial arts master and learn secret books, and your father doesn't practice martial arts, but isn't Mu Yangling's Kung Fu taught by Mu Shi?" "Who said that Mu Yangling's Kung Fu was taught by Mu Shi? Didn't it mean that it was taught by her grandfather? Her grandfather died before she was born. It's possible to leave a booklet or something. What's the trouble with it? Mu Yangling's talent is stronger than her father, so it's not surprising that she learned what her grandfather left behind, or even better. Zijian, Wu learning is different and making a fuss. An article is the same for everyone to copy, but martial arts is not, the same movement, different people make different effects, even the same people do it at different times. It's also different. Mu Yangling is born with supernatural power. How could such a person have no talent? Maybe she learned what her grandfather left behind and is better than her ancestor." Seeing that Chi Heiran was focused on speaking for Mu Yangling, Fan Zijian felt a little helpless. He didn't want to make any further distinctions, so he nodded perfunctorily and said, "Maybe what you said is right. The reborn wife is farming." Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 196. After a long time, Lu Ting took people to build the rest of the thatched house, covering the top with thick thatch. Lu Yuan patted the dry and thick thatch, and said to Mu Shi, "As long as it is not a heavy rainstorm, there will be no problem with this roof." He looked up at the hot sun in the sky, wiped his sweat and sighed, "I would rather it had a heavy rain. Look, the river is almost dry." Mu Shi turned his head to look at the river on the other side. The water level in the river has dropped sharply now, exposing the stones in the river. Mu Shi stood in the deepest part of the water, and the water did not reach his waist. The water was deep enough, and now the water in the river can no longer flow into the canal. Now the sun is bright, and the wheat and rice are growing fast. In 2 days, we can irrigate and wait for the wheat and rice to fill. With so many wheat fields, the river water is definitely not enough to irrigate, and competition for water is inevitable. Mu Shi frowned when he thought that he was leaving the day after tomorrow, and went back to discuss with his daughter, "Father is leaving the day after tomorrow, why don't our family start carrying water tonight?" "Don't wait for the news from the barracks," Mu Yangling said. "Didn't the little general open the reservoir to release water? That has to be robbed. While Dad is still at home, I can protect you. We will water the rice fields first at night, and we will water the wheat fields tomorrow." Mu Shi made up his mind, and Mu Yangling naturally listened to him. At the same time, Chi Heiran was also talking to Fan Zijian about the irrigation. "This irrigation is a big deal. I think we will give the whole army 3 days off and let them go back." Fan Zijian looked at him with raised eyebrows, and Chi Heiran sighed, "I can't help it either. The eldest brother sent me a message, saying that only our side of the 5 battalions is doing better, and the crops of the other battalions haven't even pulled out many ears of wheat. Let alone grouting, this year's grain and grass will mainly come from me." If Chi Ziyuan wasn't his elder brother, Chi Heiran would have scolded his mother, but he was his own elder brother, and his mother was his own mother. He came here mainly to help his elder brother, so he could only bear this burden. The generals of the 3rd Battalion and the 4th Battalion came to borrow water again, Fan Zijian said. Chi Heiran curled his lips and said, "If I ask them to exchange weapons, I don't want too many. I want 100 long knives, 100 long spears and 5 horses. I will give them all the water from the number 1 reservoir. Fan Zijan asked, total. Chi Heiran looked at him contemptuously, how can we share it? Of course, each has its own way. The number 1 reservoir is so big. I only got 200 long knives, 200 long spears and 10 horses in exchange, which is enough. Fan Zijan patted him on the shoulder, yes, yes, since you feel that you are losing money, then I will raise the price for you. If you want to come forward, you can raise as much as you want. They will definitely have to lower the price. Then I will leave this matter to you. Chi Heiran waved his hands away. Fan Zijan turned his head and proposed to others the price of 500 swords, 500 spears, and 10 horses each. The participants of the 3rd and 4th battalions almost vomited blood. Food and grass are not easy to obtain, and weapons are also difficult to obtain. The general gives them a lot in this regard, they are not as good as the 1st and 2nd battalions. It was their turn, and there were only so many things, and Fan Zijan really dared to speak up. But they didn't have the confidence to turn around and leave. Before the 3rd and 4th camps, there were no water conservancy measures at all, and the land was not as good as the 5th camp. Now the wheat earrings in the wheat fields are only half drawn. If the grouting is not guaranteed, they will have to drink the northwest wine to harvest next year's autumn harvest. The general asked them to scold them 2 days ago, saying that they were not even as good as Chi Heiran with one finger. Chi Heiran, a kid in his teens, was prettier than them, even though they were aggrieved, they had to admit it. The water in the river is definitely not enough to irrigate, and only Chi Heiran has repaired water conservancy in these 10 miles and 8 villages. Not only are they looking at the hot water in Chi Heiran's 3 large reservoirs, but the local gentry can't wait to come up and lick Chi Heiran's feet. The 2 generals dare not neglect now. In the end, after arduous negotiations between the 2 participating generals, the price was always reduced to 230 long swords, 230 long spears, and 5 horses per battalion. The 2 battalions equally divided the water in the number 1 reservoir. Fan Zijan was so blessed, Chi Heiran said, I think you can use this to offset the food you owe to the Sun family and the Zhao family. Aren't they worried about having no water to irrigate? You should just give up the water from the number 2 reservoir. Chi Heiran frowned, no, I have to guarantee my production first. With so many soldiers, are you afraid that you won't be able to grab water? If you drag someone up to dig a big hole in Jialing's water, and then block the river downstream, won't there be water? If Mu Yangling was here, he would definitely scold Fan Zijan for being wicked. Chi Heiran's heart moved for a moment, then he shook his head and said, no, then Songji must have eaten me alive, and he was also causing trouble for the elder brother. We will not do that immoral thing. Then you can pay back the grain after the autumn harvest. Do you think you have to pay? The big cousin wants so much grain and grass, you have to be hollowed out. What do you have to pay back? Chi Heiran pulled his hair, and finally said shamelessly, Master won't pay it back this year, but keep it until next year, what can they do? Fan Zijan. It's really shameless, he is willing to bow down. Chi Heiran made up his mind and gave all the soldiers a holiday on the same day, and opened the number 2 reservoir the next day. All military households of the 5th Battalion can go to the reservoir to fetch water for irrigation without fighting. And that afternoon, Mu Shi had already picked up buckets and followed his daughter and others to carry water into the paddy fields. The reservoir was a certain distance away from their land, and no one went to the reservoir when there was still water in the river, but on the 3rd day, the water in the river was only muddy pit water, and half a bucket of water was left in the river. Mud. In order to fight for water, Mu Yangling and the others witnessed 3 bloody fights. At this time, Mu Shi had been away for 2 days. Sitting slumped on the ground, Malu said, Aling, We have to fetch water from the reservoir. Mu Yangling was using wooden boards to surround the cart. When he heard the words, "Auntie, don't go to the reservoir, I will go to my cousin and the others, and our family will go together, you and my mother will go to the field, I'll bring the water back and you can water it in the fields." "How can I do that? This cart can hold 9 buckets of water, and we have to go back and forth several times. Anyway, we still have buckets at home, so I might as well pick another bucket." "No, the reservoir is very chaotic. If someone accidentally bumps into you, what will our family do? You can honestly take my mother to the field, or I will have to take time to protect you." Before my aunt could make up her mind, Lu Ting's voice sounded outside. "Aling, is it all right?" Lu Ting and Lu Yuan came here with several cousins. Like Mu Yangling, they were all pushing carts. When Mu Yangling saw that his cousins and aunts were also carrying buckets, he asked, "How do you express, aunt and the others go too?" Lu Ting said with a smile, "Your cousins and aunts are amazing, they are no worse than us, let's go, while it is still early, there are not many people." Mu Yangling waved goodbye to his family, pushed the cart and left. Malayashi wanted to catch up, but Chu Wanyang grabbed her and said, "Auntie, let's not make trouble, just stay here as Aling said. Wait in the field." Malayashi glared at her, "You mother is really forgiving." Chu Wanyang said with a smile, "Don't you be lenient. When Aling was only 4 years old, she told me in a serious manner that she should learn to weigh the interests. Over the years, I have long been used to it. If I follow to benefit Aling, she will stop me. I want to follow, but if it's harmful to her, even if someone forces me to follow with a knife, I can't cause her trouble." The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 197. Mu Yangling looked at the endless people carrying carts on the road and asked Lu Ting, "Is there so few people?" "Don't be dissatisfied," Lu Ting said, "wait a while, there will be more people, and the passage will be difficult. If the water cannot be poured in time, the grouting will miss the time, and the grains will be shriveled later, and the yield will not be good at all, so now people we can't rest at all. If the little general hadn't ordered us not to stay near the reservoir after sushi, we'd probably have to water all night." It was the first time for Mu Yanglingshi to go to the reservoir, but Lu Ting had been running for 2 days. The river and the reservoir were almost far away from their home. Instead of running to the river first, and then to the reservoir, it is better to be proficient from the beginning. What about the distance from the reservoir to the ground? The number 2 reservoir was full of people. Fortunately, there was no queuing as Lu Ting said. There were soldiers on guard and soldiers patrolling back and forth at the edge of the reservoir to prevent water grabbing incidents. Mu Yangling parked the cart under the reservoir, and Lu Yuan and a cousin guarded it all. Mu Yangling took 2 buckets to fetch water. She was young, small in stature, and flexible in posture. She turned to the front in a short while, and the bucket was thrown down, and the water was filled up again. Seeing this, Lu Ting hurriedly called his cousins to come forward, saying, "Aling, you fetch water there, we will carry the water down." The strong man fetching water next to him gave Lu Ting a contemptuous glance. "It takes more energy and skill to fetch water than to lift it. The reservoir has been consumed a lot in the past few days, and the water level has dropped a lot. They have to tie it up with ropes. Hold the wooden barrel and throw it down, and then lift it up after the wooden barrel is full of water. It's not that adults can't lift a full bucket of water at all." Mu Yangling has no objection. Everyone in the Lu family knows Mu Yangling's strength and is happy to do so. They lined up to put their wooden barrels over for Mu Yangling to fill with water. Mu Yangling's hands were strong, and he filled a pair of wooden barrels as soon as he went back and forth. Lu Ting hurriedly asked someone to pick them down. When she filled all the wooden barrels with water, no one behind them filled the barrels. "Take it up, there is indeed a long distance from here to the location of their cart." Mu Yangling saw a few teenagers pulling water up behind him, so he just threw down the bucket and pulled a bucket full of water. Fill them with water. The children froze for a moment, then looked up at her. Mu Yangling just smiled at them and continued to fetch water for them. The children blushed and thanked them, "Thank you." Then they picked up the bucket and left in a panic. A lot of people rushed up from below, squeezed to a few people, some of the water in the buckets of some people was squeezed out, and one fell to the ground after being hit by someone, and all the water in the bucket was spilled out. Mu Yangling frowned slightly, but the person who was hit seemed to have gotten used to it, got up and picked up the wooden bucket and came back to fetch water. Mu Yangling sighed slightly. Thankfully she didn't let her aunt and Ziyuheng come. She turned around and fetched a bucket of water, poured it into the bucket for him, and said in a low voice, "You try to avoid it. If you can't, just stop and wait for those people. Let's go there first. What if we bump into it like this and break it?" The young man blushed, nodded hurriedly, looked up at Mu Yangling after a while, and said in a low voice, "You are so amazing. I can only pull half a bucket of water every time, and you are not too big. Good brother, turn around. Can you teach me?" Mu Yangling looked down at herself. Does she look like a boy? After thinking for a while, he said, "I'm born with great strength. It's okay if you go back and practice your arm strength." Mu Yangling helped him fill up the bucket. Seeing that Lu Ting picked out a wooden bucket, he didn't bother to talk to him anymore. Turn around and go back to fetch water for them. This went back and forth 3 times, and everyone's buckets were filled. Mu Yangling finally brought a bucket of water down by herself. Her bucket had been placed on the cart, and it was full of water. Mu Yangling took the last bucket, carefully put it on. When Lu Ting saw that everyone was here, he waved his hand and said, "Okay, let's go together." The woman walks in the middle, the people in the front, back and on the left and right should pay attention. Don't be bumped by others. Aling, you go with your aunt and the others go in the middle. There are good people in this world, but there are also bad people, especially bad people who can't see the good in others. When they see someone carrying water back, some people will bump into them on purpose. If you care about it, that day's effort will be wasted. Every time the Lu family came out to fetch water, they formed gangs. When there were too many people, others would not dare to provoke them. Lu Ting and the others met twice, and they almost started to fight yesterday. In order not to hurt the women, they let them walk in the middle every time. I don't know if it was Mu Yangling's luck that he returned to the field smoothly this time. Mu Yangling pushed the scooter to turn around to go to his own field. Before leaving, he waved to Lu Ting and said, "Cousin, later you call Cousin Li and his mother, let her carry water with us." The 3-day vacation in the military camp is over, and there is only one widowed mother left in Lu Li's family. It is too dangerous for her to carry water from the reservoir alone. Lu Ting glanced at his cousins, and responded with a smile, "You will wait for us here later, and we will come over soon." They just sent the water back to irrigate the old and young at home, and then picked out empty buckets. Come again. Mu Yangling nodded. The Mu family used a large tank to hold water, which Mu Yangling carried from home. He poured water into the tank, and Malu and the others filled it with pots for watering. Mu Yangling went to the reservoir to ask for water again. Mu Yangling reckoned that they must not have arrived yet, so he helped to water them together. While watering, he reached out and pulled some ears of wheat out to observe carefully. He kept these situations in his heart and planned to write them down in his notebook. In addition, there are also the daily weather, the farming tasks that need to be done, etc. Mu Yangling recorded them all one by one. She doesn't know if she will be able to achieve anything in farming in the future, but she knows that these things must be useful. Even if she doesn't, it can always be used as a reference for future generations. So Mu Yangling attached great importance to this. Seeing that the time was almost up, Mu Yangling pushed the cart to the intersection and waited. This time, Lu Mashi really followed behind Lu Zhenji. She knew that Mu Yangling asked her to follow, and they also looked at it. Mu Yangling asked her to follow in order to save face, and she couldn't help nodding and smiling at Mu Yangling gratefully. Mu Yangling just smiled, and walked in front of her attentively. Lu Ting walked beside her, pushing the cart, and said in a low voice, "It's okay for you to help your cousin, but don't be too biased, otherwise your Aunt Ma is in the village. It's also difficult." Mu Yangling snorted coldly, and said dissatisfiedly, "I'm getting more and more confused with uncle, and it's not cousin Li's fault what happened to cousin Li's family. Come out and see what the clan can do." Lu Ting didn't speak, but kept these words in his heart. Lu Li was a good character. He Bo had been acting a little confused in the past half a year, and brother Dakang was too honest. It is not certain whether the home will still be as stable as in Linchin village. Lu Ting upholds the idea of being kind to others and asks his wife to help Lu Mashi more, but he gets closer to Lu Li's family. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 198. Mu Yangling and the members of the Lu family worked together, and they could go back and forth 10 times a day. Because the Lu family had little land, and they stayed up late to water a lot during the 2 days when Mu Shi was there, they only went to the reservoir to fetch water for 3 days. The wheat fields are watered all over. At this time, the water in the number 2 reservoir had almost bottomed out, and everyone was waiting for Chi Heiran to open the number 3 reservoir, but Songji found the military camp at this time. Songji's face was full of stubble, and his face was blue. He looked at Chi Heiran with a haggard face and said, "My good brother, I didn't want to ask you to come here, but there is really no other way." Chi Heiran and Songji have a good relationship. Seeing him like this, he couldn't help being surprised. "You were dismissed." Songji glared at him, "Can't you think of something better? Looking at you like this, you don't think you want to be promoted?" Songji choked, and said, "I haven't been dismissed from office, but it's about the same. Mingshui County just crosses such a river, and the imperial court made a decree that all the fields along the river will become your military fields and the permanent fields of military households. But there are still many people's farms downstream and in the distance. You have used all the river water, and those people can only wait to starve to death." Chi Heiran stared and said, "My lord didn't ask someone to cut off the water flow." Songji said helplessly, "No one asked anyone to cut off the water flow, but so many fields need to be irrigated. How much can still flow down? The people are suffering." Chi Heiran came back to his senses now, and said, "Don't fool me, I have already inquired clearly. These fields before were owned by those landlords and gentry. In drought years, they cut off the water flow. In case of floods, they letting water flush the fields. They have done a lot of things like this. Now that the Lord is taking over these fields, but he hasn't done anything wrong, I don't believe their life will be more difficult than before. Young General is benevolent, otherwise I wouldn't dare to come to the door," Songji said, "but look outside, the fields of the soldiers under you are right by the river, and they have to rush to water them with water from the reservoir. What about the people who are far away from the river and have no water available? God won't give them a way to survive this year, and the autumn tax is about to start. Little General, I don't want to force the people to death." Chi Heiran patted the table impatiently and said, "Just tell me what you want to do, I am impatient to listen to this." Songji said cautiously, "Little General, I heard that you still have useless water from the number 3 reservoir." Chi Heiran looked at him with a dark face. Songji bit the bullet and said, "I beg you to take pity on the poor people and release water for disaster relief." Chi Heiran was silent for a while, and said, "Let me think about it." Chi Heiran got up and left. He went out and asked people to invite the old people from various villages to ask about the watering situation. Knowing that 70% of the wheat fields have been watered, and only the remaining 30%, and the other 30% are still inferior. Chi Heiran waved them back, and then came back and said to Songji, I agree to release the water, but the downstream not only the fields of the common people, but also the land of the Sun family and the Zhao family and other squires. I don't need the salaries of the common people, but I don't give them these few squires for nothing. The corners of Songji's mouth twitched. This is not a young master who came out of the Jinxia pile, but he looked like he came out of the gang of beggars, so he didn't miss a little bit of benefits. Songji asked, then what do you want? Chi Heiran spat out two words, food. Songji thought for a while and asked, how much do you want? Not much, it's up to each family to make up their own minds. I will take out 10 bags of grain from the Sun family and the Zhao family each, and the other families will send me 10 bags. That's not much, right? One more thing, whose family you are not allowed to dig ditches to pass the water. My water is mainly for the people downstream. If those country gentry dug ditches to store water by virtue of their numbers, will my water be released in vain? The condition Chi Heiran put forward was what Songji couldn't ask for. He came here for the sake of the people downstream, so naturally he didn't want those gentry and landlords to seize too many people's resources. The matter was decided in this way, and when the military households knew that the water in the number 1 reservoir was going to be drained instead of being opened to them, they immediately became unhappy. But Chi Heiran stood on it with a cold face and looked at them coldly. They didn't dare to make trouble, they could only watch the water rushing out. I don't know who shouted, hurry up and get water to irrigate, this water will be gone. Everyone swarmed up to fetch water. Chi Heiran frowned, they have already watered 70% of the water, and some people have even finished watering, so what's the matter with the people below? It's too detrimental to others. Fan Zijian stood next to him, waving his fan, and said, there have always been many people like this. What's so special? Look, Mu Yangling is among them. Hasn't her family's land been watered? Didn't they come too? Chi Heiran looked down and indeed saw Mu Yangling, but she fetched water and handed it to the person behind her, she didn't use it herself. Chi Heiran opened his eyes and looked over, and found that behind her were old and weak women and children, and thought to himself, this Mu Yang is too kind-hearted, and he came here to fetch water for others. Mu Yangling didn't come here specifically to fetch water for others, she came here to fetch water and go back to irrigate the vegetable fields. It happened that the number 1 reservoir was releasing water, so she took a shortcut and fetched water by the river. Seeing a woman with a big belly bent down to fetch water, she was terrified, so she kindly helped her. Seeing that the old woman behind her was trembling, she also helped her. The people behind knew that the little girl was helping the old and the weak, women and children to fetch water. After all, the water has just come out. The opening of the reservoir is quite wide, and the current is fast. If a person accidentally falls, a wave will hit him and he will disappear. Those women and children who felt old and weak consciously stood in line behind Mu Yangling, and Mu Yangling never stopped fetching water. Standing on a high place, Chi Heiran quickly noticed the clue, waved and called a guard, pointed down and said, did you see those old and weak women and children? Go and fetch water, stand in a row and help them fetch water, don't let anyone fall into the river. The guards responded and went down to order about 20 people to go down. Most of the people who came to grab water today are nearby villagers. They are not military households. They have been waiting for this water for a long time, so people are crowded and no one will let them go. Event. The guard came over and snatched the wooden barrel from Mu Yangling's hand, and shouted, Miss Mu, the little general is here too, leave this place to us, you go up quickly. Mu Yangling looked up and saw Chi Heiran standing on the reservoir, nodded in response, and went out with 2 buckets of water. Walking up to Chi Heiran, he boasted, Chi Heiran, I never thought that you still have people in your heart, and now everyone praises you. Chi Heiran's face turned reddish, and he asked, What are you complimenting me for? I have everything to praise you, saying that you are benevolent and benevolent, that you are a good person, that you are handsome and martial, and that you are both talented and beautiful. Chi Heiran's complacent face suddenly collapsed, and Fan Zijian burst out laughing directly. Mu Yangling said seriously, really, they really praised you like that? Just now I heard it down there and my ears were almost confused. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 199. Chi Heiran looked at her suspiciously. You couldn't make it up, did you? Mu Yangling took his arm and said, if you don't believe me, just put on makeup and come down with me to listen. It's as if you don't need money for good words. Speaking of this, Mu Yangling was also curious, why do I sound like you guys? The relationship between the army and the people is not very harmonious, so why did the army do such a good thing, and everyone is grateful? Chi Heiran paused with a smile all over his face, and Fan Zijian smiled, and said, except for Yuan Jiajin who is loved by the people, the other soldiers are indeed not very popular with the people. Although the soldiers fought against the Hulu, the incidents of robbing the people's property and arresting the strong men also happened from time to time. In the Great Zhou dynasty, ordinary people did not like to deal with soldiers. And because the emperor of the Great Zhou dynasty emphasized culture over military affairs, and the local government controlled the lifeline of the army's food, grass, and supplies, the two sides had always had conflicts, so the relationship was not very harmonious. Qi Ziyuan was restrained, and his relationship with Wu Shanke was not good, because he seldom appeared in other places, and the people in Xinzhou prefecture were not familiar with him. Although they didn't hate him, they didn't have much affection for him. Because he took over military households before, he was a little in awe and disgusted with him. Chi Heiran didn't know that he won the goodwill of the people in Mingshui County for Qi Ziyuan by releasing the water this time, but what really made everyone feel grateful for Qi Ziyuan and Chi Heiran was because Qi Heiran asked soldiers to fetch water for the old, weak, women and children. Unintentional move. Looking at the crowds of people below, Chi Heiran felt a sense of accomplishment. I've saved a lot of people today, right? Mu Yangling and Fan Zijian nodded with suppressed smiles. Hasn't your land been watered? Why do you still come to fetch water? The vegetables in my vegetable field are almost dying in the sun. I have no choice but to carry 2 buckets of water back. What's the matter? I've come here. Why don't you just go to my house for dinner? Chi Heiran asked as he walked, what's delicious at your house? I'm so busy these days that I don't have time to go into the mountains. How can there be anything delicious? Mu Yangling was walking on the left side of Chi Heiran with 2 buckets of water, and happened to see his own corn standing tall and independent from a wheat field. His eyes lit up, and he said, let's go and see the corn, maybe it's edible. Fan Zijian walked around the corn twice, and said thoughtfully, I understand why you planted 2 seeds so far away. The corn stalks are so tall and big, and if you plant them so far away, both seeds can grow into seeds. This area is densely packed. What would happen if we planted seeds like wheat? Chi Heiran frowned, won't there be more corn? Fan Zijian slapped him on the head, stupid, can the corn stalks grow into corn? Even if I don't know how to farm, I know that what this thing needs is sunlight. If the corn is so densely planted, if the corn doesn't hold back dead, it will not granulate. Mu Yangling put down the bucket, went into the cornfield, picked a few and peeled them one by one. The peeled corn was bright yellow and full of corn kernels. When he pinched it with his fingertips, the slurry flowed onto his fingers, and Mu Yangling break it off and throw it to Chi Heiran, saying, you can eat it, then, take it back and cook it. Chi Heiran smelled it, and said, there is a clear fragrance. Zijian, didn't you say that corn kernels are not delicious? That's what it says in the book. Fan Zijian shirked his responsibility. He also broke the 2, and asked Mu Yangling thoughtfully, can this corn be harvested? Not yet. It's still tender, and it's not easy to peel off. It has to stay in the ground for about 20 days. That's exactly when the wheat grain filling is over. Mu Yangling nodded. In other words, the corn can be planted together with the wheat, and the time of sowing and harvesting will be different. Are you an inferior land? The base fertilizer is not good, and a corn cob is only so big and heavy. How much do you think this acre can produce? Fan Zijin looked at the large cornfield, and his heart became hot, and he vaguely understood why Emperor Sejong said that planting corn would prevent famine even in famine years. It's not that Emperor Sejong was wrong, but that they didn't use the right way of planting. Fan Zijin turned his head and looked at Mu Yangling with piercing eyes. This is a great achievement recorded in the annals of history. Emperor Sejong specially sent a ship to the west to obtain seeds. Ling did it. Mu Yangling didn't know what Fan Zijin was thinking, but felt goosebumps all over her body when he looked at her, and felt a bit chilly for no reason. She moved lightly, and moved behind Chi Heiran, letting him block Fan Zijin's gaze. Fan Zijin's eyes fell on Chi Heiran, and the corners of his mouth twitched slightly, feeling happy. Since you want to invite us to eat corn, you can't just pick a few, can you? Yanmo, Phoebe, go in and pick some more, pick the big ones, and we'll take the extra ones back to the barracks to eat. Yan Mo and Phoebe agreed happily, took off their coats and wrapped around the corn. Fan Zijin walked along the field, carefully observing the cornfield. Mu Yangling leaned close to Chi Heiran's ear and asked, "Is he holding back for something?" Chi Heiran nodded, then felt sorry for brother, and shook his head again. Mu Yangling touched his chin and said, "I think this bad thing must be aimed at me." Fan Zijin turned around and came back, satisfied, and asked, "Aling, does anyone come to your cornfield?" Mu Yangling shook his head, "This land belongs to our family, and it's near the foot of the mountain again. Who would come here? But this is where your family grows corn." Looking up, there is only your corn standing upright in a low wheat field and rice field. People are not curious. Wouldn't they come to steal it? Mu Yangling said with a smile, "I've looked carefully, and no one has picked corn secretly. Most people here don't know it, and they're not interested in it when they hear it's called corn. I planted this thing, but I lost money later, and no one in Chinga village dares to mess with my Mu family." Fan Zijin nodded, stroked the corn stalk and said, "This corn is a good thing, you have to take care of it, and it's best not to let it out until we have confirmed its output." Mu Yangling blinked, looked at Chi Heiran, and asked in unison, "Aren't you not confident in it?" "That was before, but now I think what Emperor Sejong said may be true. Aling, we will hand over our cornfield to you. This is a heavy responsibility. If you are not sure, ask Heiran to send you someone come and help." Mu Yangling opened his mouth slightly, and asked, "When did this cornfield become our?" Fan Zijin looked at her strangely and said, "Isn't this cornfield ours? You forgot, Heiran bought the corn seeds. When planting them, Heiran and I not only planted the field ourselves, but also sent soldiers to help. Although this land belongs to your family, you can't take my share from Heiran and me, can you?" Now even Chi Heiran's eyes widened, pointing at the cornfield, then at himself, and asked, "I still have my share in this cornfield?" Fan Zijin nodded as it should, "Of course, what do you think? The reborn wife is farming." Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 200. Mu Yangling turned his head to stare at Chi Heiran. Fan Zijin also stared at Chi Heiran. Chi Heiran stuttered under the pincers from left and right, then turned to Mu Yangling hesitantly, and said, "This should belong to us, right?" Mu Yangling thought about it carefully, and what Fan Zijin said was also reasonable, but she was obviously wrong to want to take advantage of these two people. Mu Yangling nodded and said, "Okay, how much do you think you account for?" Under Fan Zijin's stare, Chi Heiran said, 10%. Mu Yangling rolled his eyes, "What is 10% enough for?" Go ahead and let Fan Zijian talk. Fan Zijian was very satisfied with Mu Yangling's generosity, and said, it's useless for us to ask for this corn, so we just try something new, and it probably won't make any money if we sell it. Mu Yangling nodded, So, what I want is the planting method and planting data. The most important thing is that this thing belongs to Heiran. Mu Yangling and Qi Heiran shook their heads, expressing whether they understood or not. Fan Zijian looked at the two equally stupid and cute people in front of him, found a piece of grass to sit down, and motioned for them to sit down and have a long talk. Mu Yangling glanced at the cornfield, and Fan Zijian said, don't worry, Yanmo and Fei won't take it. All your corn has been broken. These two boys are smart and know we have something to say. Qi Heiran and Mu Yangling were sitting opposite Fan Zijian, listening to his explanation with their chins propped up. Seeing the two move in unison, Fan Zijian felt a little uncomfortable. He cleared his throat and said, before, the yield of corn was 300 per mu because of the wrong planting method. Although there is no harvest yet, based on my estimation, the yield per mu is no less than 500. 100, this is still on the worst inferior land, the base fertilizer is not good, and this year's weather is dry, so the worst case can yield 500 mu per mu, so what if it is under good conditions? Not to mention, such if wheat is planted in the inferior land, it is not certain whether there will be a yield of 100 catties per mu in the end. If corn is planted in the inferior land of the whole Dashu, even if there is a disaster year, the people will not be so hungry that they will be displaced and leave their homes. The family is ruined. Think about it, what a credit this is. Mu Yangling understood, you want Qi Heiran to take the credit. Fan Zijian raised his head proudly, this land is a military field under the name of Heiran. You are a military household under Heiran. Heiran bought the seeds, and Heiran even came when the seeds were planted. Don't you think this is due to Heiran? Mu Yangling twitched his lips, patted him on the shoulder and said, I told you earlier, it's useless for me to want this thing. I'll send you the planting method in a book later, and you can use it to ask for credit. When Fan Zijian saw Mu Yangling on the road, he immediately smiled with satisfaction. Qi Heiran stared and said, what do I want this credit for? What I want is military merit, and I will earn it myself. This thing works better with you than with Mu Yangling. Now that you have resources, why waste them? Mu Yangling asked them, then do you still divide the corn? It's useless if we ask for it, just break some when you want to eat, and the rest is all yours, Fan Zijian decided. Mu Yangling got up and patted his buttocks, all right then, let's go back now. Seeing that no one listened to him, Qi Heiran died of anger immediately. Just as he was about to get angry, he thought of Mu Shi as soon as he thought of it. When the time comes, he will just push Mu Shi out. It is true that the land planted by Mu Yangling should be attributed to her father, right? Thinking of this, Qi Heiran suddenly felt complacent, looked at the two of them and secretly said, wait, let's see if the Lord doesn't blind you. Yan Mo and Fei Bai didn't know where they went, and there was no one there yet, so Qi Heiran yelled at the cornfield, you guys plan to celebrate the new year inside? Come out soon. Yan Mo and Fei Bai answered vaguely inside, and it took a long time before they ran out covered with grass, each carrying a bag full of corn. Mu Yangling looked at the two bundles of corn, stared and said, do you want to eat so much? The corn is still tender, and you have stripped off all the coats, and you can't keep it. If it turns rotten later, I will stuff your mouths. It's a traditional virtue to love food and not waste it, do you know that? Yan Mo nodded and bowed his waist and said, Miss Mu, I wanted to save it for you, but didn't I want to give some to our eldest son to try something new? So I picked more on purpose. Mu Yangling was in a good mood, for the general, you have to choose carefully. I will choose some good ones for you later. Don't peel off the feeling. Bring 2 layers of clothes. Even on a hot day, you can put 3 coats on them 4 days. When the group went back to Mu's house, the ant was standing at the door watching. When she first saw Mu Yangling, she got angry and didn't see who was standing next to her. Water. Why is it like going to a temple fair, and you haven't come back until now? I thought something happened to you. Auntie, who do you think is here? Mu Yangling motioned her to see Chi Heiran and Fan Zijian, and said, I came back early, thinking that our corn should be edible, so I took the little general and the others to pick it. Seeing Chi Heiran and Fan Zijian expressing their warm welcome, the ant hurriedly welcomed them in, took the corn from Yanmo and the others, and said, I'll get this stuff, please sit down quickly, I'll ask Ziyuheng to pour it for you. When I walked to the door, I realized that I had never eaten corn, and I didn't know how to make it, so I came back to Lamu Yangling. Ling, you go get it, and I will pour tea for the little general and the others. Mu Yangling sent the things to the kitchen, put them in the cauldron. After passing through the water once, Shu Wanyang looked aside curiously, saw that she poured some salt into it and set the pot on, asked quickly, are you okay with this? Mu Yangling nodded, okay, what else do you want? Salt is so expensive, I put so much in it, it should be able to taste, that's all, let's light the fire like this. Shu Wanyang hesitated and said, I remember that there are several dishes made of corn in the book. Some are called Jinyu Mantang, and some are rich and prosperous. What's your name? Mu Yangling rolled his eyes and said, I call it boiled corn in salt water. I dare not say anything else. Emperor Sejong must have eaten this dish. Shu Wanyang slapped her daughter on the head and said, you're talking nonsense again. When Emperor Sejong mentioned the names of these dishes, the corn hadn't been found yet. Then how do you think Emperor Sejong knew about corn and the names of the dishes made of corn? He must have eaten it, maybe in a dream. Shu Wanyang didn't believe her daughter's words at all. She got up and picked up the leftover corn to ponder. This corn looks really good, I'll see if I can make some dishes later. This is yellow corn. It probably won't taste good. You have to find waxy corn and sweet corn. I think it can make that taste. But no matter what it is, I don't like to eat it as long as it tastes like corn. Why? I smell very fragrant. Mu Yangling said, nonsense, when I was learning how to grow corn with Kuan Bodhisattva, I was forced to eat a lot of corn. I ate it every day and every year. I ate it every time I saw corn, so I didn't want to eat it. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 201. Chi Heiran, who came over and listened halfway through, let out a putchy laugh. Shu Wanyang blushed slightly, and felt that her daughter had lost face to the little general, so she pushed her out and said, okay, I'll do the kitchen work, you go out quickly. Chi Heiran pulled Mu Yangling out, and said with a smile, anyway, I'm not familiar with things yet, you should practice 2 moves with me first, and teach me the move you used to fight the villain in front of your door last time. Where were you at that time? Chi Heiran nodded, Zijian and I came to join in the fun. What's the name of the move you used? Little grappler. It's better than the grappling hand I'm using now, come on, let's make a gesture. Go to the grass at the back, it's spacious there. Mu Yangling pulled Chi Heiran to the grass behind, and seeing that Fan Zijian didn't follow, he whispered to him, let's make an exchange. Chi Heiran sat cross-legged on the grass, pretending to listen. Speak. I also have a lot of moves that are suitable for group training. I will teach you all of them later. The most important thing is that I have a whole system of training plans that can help you train an excellent scout team. I will use these in exchange for you to teach me how to use internal skills and mental skills sample. Chi Heiran looked at Mu Yangling in surprise. Didn't you say that internal force is useless to you? That was before. Mu Yangling held a stone, crushed it, and said, look, if I exert a little force, you can use 50% of your internal force to catch up with my strength. When I was young, it took nearly 6 years to control the strength so that I would no longer easily injure people and smash things, but after doing moves with you, I realized that my strength has kept up, but my endurance has not kept up. Chi-Heiran nodded. Your stamina is more than twice that of the average adult. But compared to your warriors with internal strength, it is still far from enough, and, Mu Yangling lowered his voice, although you said it was impossible, I still want to try. Maybe I can practice lightness kung fu. Mu Yangling propped his chin dreamily and said, at that time, I will be able to fly around in the sky. Chi-Heiran touched her forehead. I don't even have a fever. Where is there such a lightness kung fu? Tell me, I will learn it too. I didn't tell you. Lightness kung fu means light feet, light posture, and even leaping. You need some help. Who do you see can fly around in the sky? You were a bird, and you can soar into the sky with your hands open. In short, you just say whether to change it or not. Mu Yangling asked. Chi-Heiran asked, you said you can train scouts. Mu Yangling nodded. In fact, hunters are born scouts, but no one organizes them into a system like me. Mu Yangling made an excuse for this, and said, I also read the Book of War, and if the scouts use well, you can decide the outcome of a battle. Chi-Heiran, tell me honestly, have you transferred my father to be a scout? A scout who goes deep into the enemy's territory. Chi-Heiran looked at her deeply. Did your father tell you? Mu Yangling shook her head. I guessed it. Mu Yangling wasn't lying. She guessed most of it right before Mu Shi told her, and said, my father has been away from the barracks for so long, except for the scouts and messengers. Which unit will leave the camp for such a long time? My father's ability is to put it in the 1st Battalion and the 2nd Battalion, and he will not lose to anyone. You are not so reckless and let him deliver the letter? Plus the one you broke into Hanshong Mansion last time. It's a big disaster, so it's not hard to figure out where my father is going. Chi-Heiran's face changed slightly. It's so easy to guess. Does that mean others can guess it? Mu Yangling patted him on the shoulder with one hand. What I said is easy to guess, but it is limited to us. How many people know my father and know that he is not in the barracks during this time, and they also know what happened to you last time? Chi-Heiran breathed a sigh of relief, rolled his eyes and said, scouts focus on individual combat. Can you really train them? How do you know if you don't try? Mu Yangling leaned into his ear and said, but you have to keep this from Fan Zijian. Chi-Heiran frowned. Why? I'm worried that he will call you a joke. If he knows that you handed over the scouts to me for training, then he won't come to me to settle accounts. You can't escape the scolding. Chi-Heiran nodded. No problem, then it's a deal. The corner of Mu Yangling's mouth raised slightly. Ancient scouts are equivalent to modern special forces. Mu Yangling is no stranger to these trainings, but there are still differences between modern and ancient times. This is why Mu Yangling proposed to be responsible together with Chi-Heiran. Chi-Heiran, who she doesn't understand, must understand that two people can always train an excellent scout by learning from each other's strengths, and then the father will be able to come back. The two negotiated on the arrangement of the matter and the choice of venue, etc. When Ziyuheng came over and called the two to go back to eat, what they saw was that the two were whispering with their heads on their heads. Ziyuheng was suddenly furious. In her eyes, it was the little general who was seducing and molesting her cousin. Ziyuheng turned left and right in anger, picked up a stick and hit Chi-Heiran. Chi-Heiran heard the sound of the stick waving, and while pushing Mu Yangling away, he rolled to the side nimbly and kicked towards the attacker at the same time. Mu Yangling saw that it was Ziyuheng with sharp eyes, and quickly stretched his legs to remove Chi-Heiran. With the strength of the kick, the right hand quickly pulled Ziyuheng aside. Ziyuheng, what's wrong with you? Ziyuheng flushed with anger. Cousin, the little general bullies people. Chi-Heiran stared. When did I bully you? I haven't even said a word to you since I entered the door. You bullied my cousin, Why are you so close to my cousin when you have nothing to do? You should hit me as a disciple. Fan Zijin leaned on the fence leisurely, and said leisurely, they are whispering, Miss Ziyuheng, it's better not to disturb, or if you are not careful, you will lose an arm and break a leg. Qi Heiran blushed immediately. Mu Yangling glared at Fan Zijin and said, why are you everywhere? Go away, Ziyuheng, don't think about it. I'm talking to the little general. He didn't bully me. Ziyuheng looked at Qi Heiran suspiciously, and Mu Yangling whispered in her ear, I'm talking about something big with him, about my father, don't worry about it, keep it from my family and Fan Zijin, don't worry about it, let them know. Ziyuheng nodded repeatedly, and when she turned around, she blocked Fan Zijin's gaze, stared back at him, and said, cousin, auntie told you to go back to eat, and the pot of corn should be fine too. I tasted it and thought it would be fine, it's delicious and sweet. Fan Zijin snorted coldly, and said coolly in Mu Yangling's ear, your cousin is quite protective of you, but I don't know if your cousin treats her equally well. Mu Yangling's hands started to itch, but in the end he couldn't hold it back. He grabbed Fan Zijin's ears and said, I've wanted to do this for a long time. Fan Zijin was stunned for a moment when his ears were twisted, and then he blushed and jumped up, pointing at Mu Yangling you for a long time, so angry that he couldn't speak. Qi Heiran was also shocked, jumped up and pushed Mu Yangling away, and shouted, how dare you pull Zijin's ears? When Fan Zijin heard Qi Heiran's voice, his eyes immediately turned red. His heirs, even his father and mother didn't dare to talk to him, but today they were picked up by a yellow-haired girl. It's a shame. Qi Heiran was also very angry, can a man's ears be easily pulled? This is how Zijin will stand up in front of others in the future? He looked around and found that there were only 4 of them here. He immediately bared his teeth and threatened Mu Yangling and Ziyuheng, if you dare to speak out about this, I will beat you to death. Mu Yangling and Ziyuheng looked at each other in dismay, I just pulled my ears, what's the matter? Qi Heiran and Fan Zijin stared at them together, this is about a man's dignity. Mu Yangling twitched the corner of his mouth, pulled Ziyuheng, nodded and assured, we will definitely not tell others. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 202. Except for Mu Yangling, it was the first time for everyone to eat corn, and Qi Heiran said pertinently, it's delicious, and I didn't make my throat grow louder. Fan Zijin asked, is it because you are still young? Mu Yangling nodded, you can still eat like this in about 10 days. The corn gets old very quickly. At that time, you can only take it back, dry it, peel off the corn kernels, crush it and cook polenta to eat. Mu Yangling thought after thinking about it, he still said, but I think it's better for pigs to eat this stuff. The ant stared and said, whose pigs are so blessed to eat corn? No matter how unpalatable this corn is, it can't be worse than bran, right? Every year when the crops are green and yellow, who hasn't eaten bran for a month? Xu Wanyang also nodded, if this thing can be used as food to fill their stomachs, it can indeed save many people. Aling, don't say anything about feeding pigs, which will cause outsiders to hear and misunderstand. In the end Qi Heiran took a basket of corn from Mu Yangling and asked someone to deliver it to Qi Ziyuan. Qi Heiran's original intention was to let the eldest brother try something new, but Qi Ziyuan called him back overnight, and specially asked the messenger to bring Fan Zijin and Mu Yangling with him. Mu Yangling had just finished watering the wheat and rice fields, and was about to sleep peacefully, but was pulled up when he lay down. Hearing that he was going to Fukan, Mu Yangling immediately refused, I have to be at home, in the middle of the night, if my house was attacked by thieves, my family is old, weak and young, what's wrong with being at home? Qi Heiran stared and said, I ask someone to guard at the door, who would dare to bump into it so blindly? Get up quickly, my elder brother is waiting in Fukan. Mu Yangling could only get up, put on some clothes, and climbed onto the horse in a daze. Chi Heiran saw that although Mu Yangling's eyes were half closed, he walked without shaking. He was impressed by her ability, jumped on the horse and ran away first. Fan Zijian followed behind him. As soon as the horse started running, Mu Yangling woke up, and the three of them headed for Fukin under the protection of a team of guards. It only took half an hour to ride horses from Mingshui County to Fukin, and the few people used the token Qi Ziyuan gave Qi Heiran along the way to let them open the city gate. Qi Ziyuan was sitting in the study waiting for them, and there were wine and food on the table. The three of them ran for half an hour. All the sleepy ones woke up, and the three of them stood in front of Qi Ziyuan in a row. Qi Ziyuan was gnawing a corn cob in his hand. When he saw a few people coming in, he put down the corn cob in his hand and looked at them carefully. Among the three of them, Mu Yangling was only 10 years old, and Fan Zijian and Qi Heiran were only 13 years old. Thinking of what these three children did, Qi Ziyuan couldn't help laughing out loud, clapping his hands and saying, that's right, I underestimated you all before." The three children became a little apprehensive, trembling and stealing glances at Qi Ziyuan, winking with the people next to them from time to time, and asking each other, "Have you done anything bad recently?" Qi Ziyuan turned his back, took out a raw corn from the basket on the table, turned around and asked them, "You guys made this?" The three looked at each other, and in the end Qi Heiran was the first to nod in recognition. Seeing Qi Ziyuan smiling, Qi Heiran felt that it was not a bad thing, so he boasted, "Brother, this kind of seed was brought by Zhuang Dai back then, and Mu Yangling took it for planting. These are the ones I picked out and sent over for you to try." "I know. I asked Fei Bai. I heard from Fei Bai that Aling's corn can grow 2 cobs on one plant, and each cob is as big as this. It's definitely not possible for all of them to be this big, but it's about the same size." Mu Yangling looked at Qi Ziyuan's face and said, "Because the emergence rate of corn is a little lower this year, it's a little thin, and the top dressing is good enough. That's why the corn on the cob is so big. Then next year, can you plant such a good one again? Next year, with experience and time to prepare base fertilizer, it should be better than this year." The corner of Qi Ziyuan's mouth curled up, and he asked, "Then you estimate, how much can 1 mu of your cornfield produce?" Mu Yangling's eyes were full of bewilderment. It was her first time farming, and she got back the estimate. "Now I can roughly estimate how big a piece of land can be." On the contrary, Fan Zijian pondered for a while and said, "Big cousin, I have checked carefully. If there is no accident, the yield per mu should be between 500 and 600. Qi Ziyuan instantly clenched the corn in his hand, and asked, "What if it is cultivated in a high-quality land?" Fan Zijian calculated in his mind, and said, "It should be about 700 or 800 caddies. This year is drought. How many times have you watered the corn?" Qi Ziyuan asked Mu Yangling. One time," Mu Yangling said. "Corn is a drought-resistant crop, so it doesn't need special watering." Qi Ziyuan's eyes became brighter. "Does anyone know about the corn planting in your place? Has the news of the high yield of corn spread?" Fan Zijian already had a vague guess in his heart. Only Qi Heiran and Mu Yangling were still confused. Mu Yangling shook his head and said, "Except for our village and the Lu family in Kaoxi village, no one knows that my land is planted with corn, because my aunt doesn't have much confidence in planting corn, and everyone doesn't know that corn will produce high yields. That piece of land is in the middle of my family's field, near the other side of the mountain. There is only my family's land, and no one passes by there." In ancient times, the land was sparsely populated, and the news was delayed, so no one except the village and my uncle knew that she planted corn. Even the Lu family, only Lu Daqian and Lu Erkin knew about it. Qi Ziyuan was completely relieved now, and said to Mu Yangling, "I want you to save all the corn harvested this time as seeds. Next year, 50% of all military fields must be planted with corn, and Yanjai field must also have some corn 40% planted." Fan Zijin's expression changed slightly, and he asked, "Big cousin, is there a natural disaster?" Qi Heiran also reacted, "Is there still going to be a war?" Qi Ziyuan looked outside. His guards were guarding outside the study. He could be sure that their conversation was safe. He sighed and said, "The natural disaster has already begun, and the war has also begun. This year, apart from the severe drought in Xinzhou Prefecture, there are also cases in Hangzhou area. It hasn't rained for 2 months, but the Jinghu area has been raining intermittently from April to now, and it hasn't been sunny for 7 consecutive days. Hangzhou and Jinghu are both major grain producers. In previous years, 4 grains were shipped to the north. Chang came out of these 2 places." The eyes of the 3 of them widened. They only knew that Xinzhou Mansion was sad, but they didn't expect that other places were similar. Qi Ziyuan said again, "This year, Jingguo is only worse than us." Jin soldiers occupied Jingzhou Mansion, and after Hanshong Mansion area, they forced the people to herd in enclosures, which ruined a lot of fertile land. The food they harvested there was less than 30% of what they had in previous years. And the spring of this year is full of rabbits, and most of the pastures have been ruined. I heard that many cattle and sheep starved to death. Since April, refugees have appeared. Jinping is now fighting Xixia, but this situation will worsen. In order to obtain more food and resources, they may drag Dezhou into it.